was a quiet fall evening in Waterbury, Connecticut, when 13-year-old Stanley Edwards Jr. grabbed his bike and told his mom he'd be right back. He never returned home. What began as a normal night in a small suburban neighborhood would soon become one of the most shocking crimes in Connecticut history, a murder so brutal, so senseless that even the police struggled to understand it. The killer wasn't a stranger in the dark or a man on the run. He was 20-year-old Todd Joseph Rizzo, a former Marine, someone the neighborhood trusted. He lived just a few houses away. On September 30th, 1997, Rizzo lured young Stanley into his backyard, telling him they'd build a bike ramp together. But what he really wanted was to kill. Without warning, Rizzo picked up a sledgehammer and struck the boy in the head again and again until he was dead. Then he dragged the body behind the house and buried it under dirt and leaves. When police questioned him later that night, Rizzo confessed with chilling calm. He told them he'd done it because he wanted to know what it felt like to take a human life. This wasn't a crime of rage or revenge. It was a test of how far curiosity could go before it became pure evil. This is the story of Todd Joseph Rizzo, the man who killed for curiosity, and the boy whose life ended because of it. Classification: murderer characteristics, former U.S. Marine. He wanted to know what it felt like to kill. Number of victims. 1. Date of murder, September 30th, 1997. Date of arrest, October 2nd, 1997. Date of birth, October 11th, 1978. Victim profile: Stanley Edwards, 13. Method of murder: hitting with a 3-pound sledgehammer. Location: Waterbury, Connecticut, USA. Status: sentenced to death on June 23, 1999. Resentenced to death on June 23, 2005. Todd Rizzo was sentenced to death in 1999. The former U.S. Marine was convicted of killing 13-year-old Stanley Edwards of Waterbury with a 3-pound sledgehammer in September 1997 because he wanted to see what killing someone felt like. Rizzo was 18 years old when he committed the crime. Death sentence upheld in bludgeoning murder of Waterbury teen. November 21, 2011. The Connecticut Supreme Court on Monday upheld both the state's death penalty law and the death sentence of a man who killed a 13-year-old boy with a sledgehammer in 1997. Both decisions came in the appeal of 33-year-old death row inmate Todd Rizzo, whose lawyers challenged Rizzo's convictions and the legality of the state's death penalty under the Connecticut Constitution. The High Court issued the 6-1 decision, rejecting all of Rizzo's arguments and upholding his death sentence. Justice Fleming L. Norcott Jr. was the lone dissenter, saying he continued to maintain his position that the death penalty has no place in the jurisprudence of the state of Connecticut and recommending a life prison sentence for Rizzo. Rizzo's public defenders and a state prosecutor who handled Rizzo's appeal didn't immediately return phone messages Monday. Police said Rizzo confessed that he struck up a conversation with Stanley Edwards as the boy rode his bicycle by his house in Waterbury on September 30, 1997. Rizzo was an 18-year-old former Marine at the time. The 7th grader knew and trusted Rizzo through Rizzo's job at a video store, and he followed Rizzo into Rizzo's backyard to hunt snakes, prosecutors said. Rizzo then told police that he straddled Edwards like a horse and hit him 13 times with a 3-pound sledgehammer as the boy begged him to stop. Rizzo told police that he simply wanted to know what it felt like to kill somebody. Rizzo was sentenced to death under a 1995 state law that allows jurors in death penalty cases to weigh aggravating factors such as a crime's brutality against mitigating factors such as abuse a defendant suffered during childhood. A 3-judge panel imposed the death sentence on Rizzo in 2005. He had appealed his conviction on numerous claims, including that there was a lack of evidence of an aggravating factor, that the 3-judge panel improperly weighed aggravating factors against mitigating factors, and that the state's death penalty law violated both the U.S. and state constitutions. The Supreme Court ruled that the death penalty does not violate the Constitution, which reaffirmed previous similar rulings in the death penalty cases of serial killer Michael Ross, who was executed in 2005, and Daniel Webb, who kidnapped and killed a bank executive in Hartford in 1989 and remains on death row. Rizzo's lawyers also claimed that capital punishment does not serve the legitimate goals of deterrence, incapacitation, or rehabilitation. The Supreme Court majority disagreed in an 86-page opinion written by Chief Justice Chase T. Rogers. As long as there remains powerful evidence of strong public support for the death penalty, we will not attempt to discern a contrary view of the public will or to answer complex policy questions best answered by the legislative process. Rizzo pleaded guilty to capital felony in 1999, and a jury sentenced him to lethal injection. but the state Supreme Court overturned the sentence in 2003, ruling that a judge had not properly instructed jurors before they began deliberating. Rizzo then chose a 3-judge panel for the second penalty phase trial, and the panel sent him back to death row in 2005. He wanted to kill someone and did, May 21st, 2005. Waterbury. From the bedroom window of his Marion Avenue home, Todd Rizzo watched children come and go and knew the times they would go by as he obsessed about killing someone. A year after being sentenced to die for killing 13-year-old Stanley Edwards, a neighborhood boy Rizzo spotted while the boy was out for a ride on his bicycle, Rizzo told a television reporter his obsession to kill began when he was 13 in middle school and continued through his high school years. He thought that by enlisting in the U.S. Marine Corps, his obsession would subside. Whether it did is unclear, but it re-emerged when he was discharged. On September 30, 1997, 2 weeks after being discharged from the Marines, Rizzo acted on that obsession to kill and bludgeoned Stanley to death with a sledgehammer. He struck the boy a dozen times. The April 2000 telephone interview taped by Shelley Sindland of WTIC Fox 61 television was played at Waterbury Superior Court on Friday during the 4th day of Rizzo's penalty hearing. This is Rizzo's second penalty phase hearing. In 1999, a jury sentenced him to die. In 2003, the state Supreme Court overturned that sentence because Judge William Holden did not instruct jurors that aggravating factors had to outweigh mitigating factors beyond a reasonable doubt to make death the appropriate sentence. The sentence was also overturned because of statements state's attorney John Connolly made during closing arguments. This second penalty phase hearing is to determine only if Rizzo should live or die. His guilt is not the question. Rizzo talked nonchalantly during the telephone interview and answered Sindland's questions without hesitation. She asked him what it was like to be on death row, whether he had a relationship with other men on death row, and what he felt about being put to death. She asked him about killing Stanley and what the boy's last words were. Rizzo talked about his day in jail, rising at 7 a.m., watching television, and going to bed whenever he wanted. He said he got used to the constant banging he hears in prison, was writing 50 to 60 pages of fiction almost nightly, and hadn't been outside since being sentenced in August 1999. He told the reporter of smelling Stanley's blood for a whole month, and the gurgling sound the boy made when the first blow of the sledgehammer connected with his head. When he got hit, it was like taking a sip of beer and letting out air like he got the wind knocked out of him. He turned around and spun around like a windmill. It was pitch black. I never saw myself killing him. It was pitch black. But at some point during the interview, he said the moon was out. In September 1999, Sindland wrote 2 death row inmates because the state was preparing the lethal injection chamber for Michael Ross, a serial killer who was put to death by lethal injection last week. Rizzo told Sindland he did not know Ross was a serial killer but considered Jeffrey Dahmer my father and studied other serial killings. It was like when I made my decision I was going to do it, it wasn't going to be anyone I knew. When Stanley showed up, I exploded. There was no one around, and I thought it was the perfect time. That is what I felt like. Rizzo's 30-minute interview included conversations about having no feelings and wanting to be put to death. His feelings changed while in jail when he fell in love with a high school girl, and they planned to marry before the engagement broke off. With the love in his life, Rizzo told Sindland he began to have feelings about having killed someone, wondered what Stanley's mother was going through and how he would feel if it had happened to someone in his family. They should have killed me before when they sentenced me. Punishment wasn't prison time, but death, Rizzo told Sindland. Rizzo told the reporter before he dies he wants to talk with Stanley's mother. He isn't sure what he'd say. Rizzo said he isn't the animal he was in 1997, but that he would die like an animal. Technically, my life is over. My life ended at age 18. This is my life from now on, Rizzo said in the interview with Sindland. Rizzo said before he recognized Stanley that night, he knew he wanted to kill him. He had seen Stanley around the neighborhood and had come to think of him as a friendly, outspoken kid. I remember one day he said he heard I got out of the Marine Corps. I almost snapped and told him to mind his business. When he showed up, we started talking. It didn't matter who he was. I had to kill that night. Rizzo said he saw a woman look out a window and thought he couldn't go through with it. Then he asked Stanley if he wanted to see snakes in his backyard. Rizzo said he went to get a flashlight, which was near the sledgehammer. I wasn't sure I was going to do it. Stanley was giving up because he didn't see any snakes. He said they were probably gone because it was dark out, and that is when it happened. I was standing on a ledge above him. My knees were parallel to the back of his neck. He never turned around. I was shaking. I remember looking up at the moon. It was like it wasn't even me. Rizzo swung the sledgehammer down on the boy's skull, jumped on his back, and pummeled him a total of 12 times. Rizzo told Sinlin he began to feel regret about killing Stanley in March or April of 1999 when his high school friend came back into his life. But in a letter written from his jail cell to a Marine buddy 2 weeks after the killing, Rizzo bragged about achieving his second goal in life. Sinland was the second witness called by the state. The first was John Fleischer, his Marine buddy of Canada. Fleischer was questioned about his relationship with Rizzo after getting Rizzo's letter dated October 10, 1997, that also included a news article about the killing. In the letter, Rizzo said, "Well, let's say you might be reading about me one day. Just add me to your long list of famous killers like Jeffrey Dahmer, Mr. John Gacy, Henry Lucas, and so on. Yes, from the news article enclosed Essek, you'll learn to see I've been arrested for murdering a 13-year-old boy. I beat the backside of his skull in with a sledgehammer in my backyard and dropped his body on a side road with his head wrapped in a plastic bag. So way back in July when you, Jones, and Sims talked about the truth, if we could actually kill another person, well, I did. That knocks off number 2 on my goal list." Rizzo told Fleischer he'd keep him informed. He goes on to say he was on the entire front page of my paper and on many other papers and all over the news. I am sorry for what I've done because my life is now over. I am sick either facing life in prison with no peril sick or the death sentence, which in CT is lethal injection. Anyway, now that my life is through, how's yours doing? After testimony by Fleischer and Sinland and the tape was played in court, the state rested its case. Rizzo's attorneys Ronald Gold and David Channing gave the court a list of up to 35 witnesses they planned to call, including Rizzo's father. Mothers say convicted killer was once a trusted babysitter. May 29, 2005. Convicted child killer Todd Rizzo was once a trusted babysitter. 2 mothers have testified in a hearing to consider his penalty. Lynn Connolly and Violet Boivert told a 3-judge panel Friday that during the mid-1990s, Rizzo, who is now 26, was a babysitter for their children, took them to the park, and played with them. Neither woman said she was concerned about leaving their children with Rizzo, who was a high school student in Waterbury at the time. He was very good to my children, Boisvert said on the 8th day of Rizzo's death penalty hearing in Waterbury Superior Court. I never had a problem with Todd. I never mistrusted him. Boisvert said her 2 sons saw Rizzo as an older brother, calling him Todd Squad. My kids loved Todd, she said. The 5 children now range in age from 12 to 21. Rizzo's public defenders are trying to prove that mitigating factors such as his difficult and unsupervised childhood and past good deeds should spare him the death penalty. Prosecutors are trying to prove the crime was particularly cruel and heinous, making Rizzo eligible for the death sentence. Perrin Marquet also testified that he and Rizzo were best friends when they attended middle school. Students often picked on Rizzo because he was undersized and had red hair and freckles, he said. But by their junior year in high school, Rizzo dyed his hair black, watched violent movies, and read books about serial killers, Marquet said. Rizzo also collected serial killer trading cards, he said. I was hoping it was just a phase he would let go as time went on, Marquet said, so I didn't really make a big deal about it. Rizzo, an ex-Marine, was 18 on September 30, 1997 when he persuaded Stanley Edwards IV to hunt snakes with him. He told police he straddled the 13-year-old boy like a horse and hit him 13 times with a 3-pound sledgehammer as the boy begged him to stop. He pleaded guilty to capital felony in 1999. He dumped the boy's body in a nearby wooded lot. He told authorities he needed to know what it would be like to kill someone. A jury sentenced Rizzo to death, but the state Supreme Court overturned the sentence in October 2003. The justices ruled that the jury had not been properly instructed. The setting for this story is Waterbury, Connecticut. According to most newspapers, this town is pretty quiet. But then, again, they always are, aren't they? The hero of the tale is Todd Rizzo, 20. It seems that Todd had a bit of a thing for serial killers, especially Jeffrey Dahmer. He told police his interest in murderers was rather intense. I hope this doesn't give you a lot reading this any silly ideas. Young Todd also had another interest. He was a Marine. Well, he was actually a former Marine. It's always great of the U.S. military to train these guys to kill, then tell them they don't belong in the Army, sending them out into society with their newfound skills, combined with an anger that was not formerly there. Rant. So Todd was bored one day, September 30, 1997. He couldn't think of anything to do, and all he had to play with was a 3-pound hammer. One can't really think of many fun games that you could play with one of those, at least not without a playmate, which is exactly what Todd sought out. The next door neighbor's 13-year-old son, Stanley Edwards, just happened to come along at this time. An idea appeared in Todd's tiny brain, and he decided that it was time to find out what it was like to kill someone. He asked Stanley if he wanted to come over and hunt some snakes. Must be what they do for fun. In Waterbury, Stan seemed pretty interested in killing some innocent animals, so he jumped at the chance. Unfortunately for Stanley, he soon found out that the dumb animal was him. Once the boy was in the yard, Todd took his hammer and proceeded to smash Stanley's head in. 13 times the sledgehammer cracked against the young kid's skull. I guess he probably died after 6 or 7 blows, but Todd kept going just in case. It didn't take long for police to arrest Todd, who then quickly confessed to what he had done. He told police he wanted to see what it felt like to kill someone. At his trial, Todd's lawyer said the murder was a tragic aberration in the life of a man who held steady jobs and hosted church events. He also cited Rizzo's academic success at Warren Caner Regional Vocational Technical School, where he excelled in the culinary program. He asked the jury to consider that Rizzo admitted to the September 30th, 1997 murder and cooperated with police. But the jury found him guilty and recommended a death sentence anyway. June 25, 1999. A Connecticut jury yesterday recommended a death sentence for a 20-year-old man who confessed to killing a 13-year-old neighbor with a sledgehammer because he wanted to know what it felt like to kill. Todd Rizzo pleaded guilty to the September 30, 1997 slaying of Stanley Edwards. He confessed to luring the boy into his yard under the guise of hunting snakes and hitting him 13 times with a 3-pound sledgehammer. He told police he wanted to see what it felt like to kill someone. Police had said Rizzo told them he had an intense interest in Jeffrey Dahmer and other serial killers. October 3, 1997. A Waterbury, Connecticut teen fascinated with serial killers told police he lured a 13-year-old boy into a backyard and sledgehammered him to death for no good reason. It was like a sort of urge, I guess. Rizzo, 18, told police he also said he was fascinated with Jeffrey Dahmer and wanted to find out what it felt like to kill somebody. The teen knew the 7th grader casually through his former job at a video store. After luring him into his backyard to hunt for snakes, Rizzo sat on him like a horse and hit him a bunch of times in the head until the boy stopped making gurgling sounds. Rizzo, who was just discharged from the Marine Corps after serving less than a year, was linked to the crime by a woman who said she saw his car in the area where the body was found. Todd Rizzo showed no emotion when he was sentenced to death in 1999. The judge called his act a cold-blooded execution. But years later, when Connecticut abolished the death penalty, Rizzo's sentence was changed to life without parole. He will spend the rest of his life in a cell alive, while his 13-year-old victim never got the chance to grow up. Today, his name is remembered as a symbol of a different kind of evil, one born not from desperation or hate, but from curiosity and obsession. Rizzo once said he wanted to know what killing felt like. Now he knows what forever feels like, locked away with nothing but his own mind as punishment. Because some monsters aren't made by trauma or anger. Some are made by choice.